how do jazz musicians come up with something like that from a simple melody like this? When I first started listening to jazz, I would listen to recordings and then pull out my real book or lead sheets and just see if I could follow along and figure out what was happening. A lot of the time, I had absolutely no idea what was happening in the recordings. I could see the melody right there on the page, but what I was hearing on the record sounded quite a bit different. Once I got more experience, though, I learned that what I was hearing in recordings wasn't magic, but 3 specific things that jazz musicians use to make melodies more jazzy. And once you know what those things are, you can apply them to anything. Jazz standards, pop songs, stale church hymns, anything that you're working on. Fair warning though, once you have these tools, no melody is safe, so make sure to jazz responsibly. Let's get into it. So for this video, we're going to be using the classic jazz standard, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, as an example. Just kidding. We are going to be using Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and of course, this isn't a jazz standard, but I think the reason this works so well is because it's a very recognizable melody, and as you can see here, it's completely quarter notes and half notes, so it's going to be a great way to showcase some of these techniques that we're going to be using. So of course, here is Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Let's go ahead and start by playing the melody as is. And everything is on the downbeats. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not that interesting, especially if we're playing in a jazz style. So if we go on to the first technique that we can use, the first one is syncopation. Now, you'll hear that there's only a few notes there that are being anticipated there at the beginning. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then again here. Right? So we only have 2 notes here that are being anticipated. This one and this one. Anticipation means that we are doing a syncopation, but we're making it early, right? So if it's a note that's supposed to be on beat 1, we're putting it right in the measure before on the and of 4, and that can create a lot of interest and forward momentum. Now, this was a fairly modest example of where we only took the first note of each phrase and anticipated it. The second example does it a little bit more. Listen to this. Right, so we have a few examples of anticipation right here, and here, and here, and both of these. We have one place where it's actually going a little bit later, right? So we have, and instead of having beat 4 right on, we're waiting a half of a beat and then going and 1 and a 1, 2, and, right? And 2, 3, 4, right? So that would be a little bit closer to what you actually might hear if you're hearing a jazz musician play something in a very simple manner, right? Where we're adding some syncopations, and maybe about a third to a half of the notes would be syncopated. A little bit goes a long way. You don't need everything to be syncopated in order to be in more of a swing style. Hey, if you're enjoying this content and you want to go beyond these techniques for melodies and build a real foundation for jazz piano, check out my course, the Jazz Piano Launchpad. In the course, we are covering the 3 core skills of jazz piano. You may not have thought about it this way, but all of the skills in jazz piano really boil down to 3 skills: comping, melody, and soloing. So in the Jazz Piano Launchpad, we cover these core skills in depth. So whether you are working toward playing with others for the first time, or you're already going to jam sessions and you want to feel more at home playing keys in a rhythm section, this is definitely where you should start. So go ahead and check that out in the link in the description. Let's go ahead and get back into it. Let's go ahead and go on to the next technique that you can use, which is repetition. And the nice thing about this one is we can create a lot of rhythmic interest while not having to change any notes, right? We're just going to repeat some of the notes in order to create a little bit more interest. Right, so here we only have these what were 2 quarter notes, right, which are now going to be 4 eighth notes, right? So let's hear that again. And again here, a little bit goes a long way. You don't have to do a ton with this in order to create a little bit more swinging rhythm with your melodies, right? So let's go ahead and go on to the next one, where we're going to have another place where the repetition is added, and we'll see how that sounds. Now, one thing that you'll notice is a lot of times when I'm doing these repeated notes, I'm trying to keep these as smooth as possible, as if a horn player is playing this. If I were to sing this, it would be like do do dot dot do dot do da 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 dot 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 do da. So you notice that on those repeated notes, most of the time I'm trying to make this as smooth as possible. So far we have talked about syncopation and repetition as different techniques that you can use to add some more interest and swinging rhythm into your melodies to make things sound more jazzy, as we might put it. And here is the last technique, which is embellishment. Now, embellishment can go really far. Sometimes it's just barely going outside of the melody, and then sometimes it means completely ignoring part of a melodic phrase and playing your own phrase instead, right? So this could be a lot of things, but let me show you just a few simple ways that we can get started with embellishment, right? So here's the first example. Right, so we have really 3 places where we are embellishing in this line. We have this first part, and then we have this little one right here, and we have this one right here. Everything is actually the same as the previous example. So instead of going, right, we are going slightly above that note that we're on, and then I'm going slightly below it. This is sometimes called a turn. So we're kind of going around the note that we're focusing on, so instead of just playing that specific note. Right? And you could do this in a lot of different places. If I'm just playing through the melody, I don't have this written down, but right. So I'm just using the same technique, and applying it into a bunch of different places. Again, these are all embellishments. They're kind of taking repetition one step further, because we are playing more notes, but we're going just a little bit above and a little bit below the melody note. And the nice thing about these really close embellishments is they're not that far from the melody. So if someone is listening to you play this song, they might not be thinking like, oh, they're playing a completely different song. They can still hear the melody, which is really nice, and is usually good to do, especially if it's a less familiar melody, or you want for the audience to be able to hear the melody really quickly, right? And so that's what we have for that first example. And then this other one, we're going above the chord, we're going up to the next chord tone. So I haven't put in chord symbols right here, but I think the chord symbol I'm doing here is like an F major chord. So on this chord, I'm going from the A to the C, which would be the 3rd to the 5th, right? And so if you're going to jump outside of the melody, a chord tone is a great way to go, right? You can outline the chord, or you can just play it safe and just do things, slightly one note above or one note below the melody, and that works really good. Of course, the main principle here is to use your ears. And when I say that, when I say use your ears, I mean try a bunch of different things and just try it and see if you like it, and then keep using it if you really like it, right? So here is right? Here's another example of where I am outlining a chord. I'm going outside of that melody note, which is on the E's, right? I'm going up to the G and then up down to the C. And right here, of course, again, I don't have chords written, but the chord is, let's see, yeah, it's a C major, right? So I am outlining this chord with the third, the fifth, the third, and then the root. And this is a pretty simple melody. It's okay because the melody itself is on a lot of like thirds and roots and fifths. It's totally fine when we are jazzing this up. We're changing the style a little bit. It's fine to stay on these like thirds and fifths and things like that. So that's the first main example for embellishment. So now if we go on to the last example, this is going a little bit further with embellishment. Take a listen. Right, so we're starting to go a little bit outside of the melody. Instead of playing this C note twice, right? So in Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, we're usually hearing the melody note twice before we switch to the next melody note, like so. Right? So in this example, rather than repeating that note, I am doing a completely different melody that's leading to the next note. So we can see... right? I'm still going toward the melody notes, and I'm still thinking about the melody, but I'm having a bit more freedom with how I'm getting from melody note to melody note. This one, I decided to go up in a scale, right? So that's what's happening right here. I'm adding an extra little note in the middle there, and I'm starting to use notes that are slightly outside of the scale. And so this one, I'm doing a note that's just a half step below the note I'm trying to get to. And then I do the same thing a little bit later. I'm using that C sharp. Right? So these are all techniques that you can use to get more comfortable embellishing melodies. Now, how can you actually use this? Because I know I just gave you a bunch of different techniques. Some of them you might be familiar with. Some of them are completely new, especially the ones toward the end with chord tones and lower neighbors and chromatic notes. Those might be a little bit confusing. One thing I would recommend doing, the first one, actually, I'll give you two things. The first one I would recommend doing is write out a melody and write out some of these embellishments and then actually practice them. So practice anticipating and practice moving the rhythms to be more swinging, and then practice doing the repetition of the melody. Start with writing it out and then get to the point where you can do it without writing it out. And singing is also helpful here, where you could sing it, see what you like. You can either write it down or go straight to the keyboard. The second thing I would recommend doing is spend time transcribing. So not just transcribing people playing the solos. I know that that's usually what people are talking about when they're talking about transcribing, but transcribe the way that pianists and horn players actually play melodies. It's a lot easier to hear the embellishments that people put on melodies. It's probably an easier way to start transcribing. So I'd recommend starting with that rather than going straight to complete improvised solo transcription. And by doing that, you'll start to see some of these techniques used in real songs, in real jazz standards. Of course, I'd recommend starting off with songs that you already know, songs that you're familiar with. Even if they are or are not jazz standards, just starting off with something that you're much more familiar with will be a lot of help. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would recommend checking out, once again, my course at the Jazz Piano Launchpad. We go into a lot more depth in how to interpret melodies, looking at lyrics, figuring out how to really make a melody your own and interpret it. So I definitely recommend checking that out for more content around melodies and and interpreting melodies, but also so that you can get that foundation for jazz piano performance that you really need if you want to be able to play with a group. So thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.